Okay.
Hello, welcome to Level 2, Practice Like a Professional Button Masher. My name is Dr. Andrea Vos-Rochefort, and I'm working with...
Dr. Julianne Kirk Doyle.
We are really excited to give you some tips, pointers, and strategies to make the most of your time in the practice room.
So jumping right in, we wanted to ask and have you think about how many of you are involved in sports or dance, and just, putting that in the chat, but what kinds of activities you're involved with outside of music. And then to think about, what do you focus on in your sports and dance practices? How long are those practices, and what helps you get better? Typically, you have a coach talking to you and giving you pointers and ideas. And, thinking like in track or swimming, you have to improve your times. You want to do your activity quicker, and shaving those little precious seconds off your time can sometimes score you higher in meets and competitions. So thinking about what kinds of goals you set in each practice, and then what your long-term goals over a season are. Similarly, in dance classes, you have a dance teacher giving you pointers throughout on your technique and how to improve your turnout or your kicks or your turns. So how are these maybe different, these practices different from a meet performance or competition, or if you're playing a game in sports? So then on a completely different topic, I want you to think about playing video games. How do you get better at video games? You don't have a coach or a teacher telling you what to do. It's merely your exploration. So how many times does it take to conquer a level when you're playing a video game? Often you repeat that level until you level up. And what do you do when you get frustrated? Think about how time can just fly by when you're working to pass those levels. Can you make practicing the clarinet just as exciting as that exploration of video games and trying to conquer those levels? So thinking about leveling up your clarinet mechanics, leveling up your clarinet practice so you can play at faster tempos. So with your practice, play games, make up your own warm-ups and exercises, and enjoy that practice, thinking about how it can lead to your progress, just like in your sports, video games, dance classes, and whatnot, other things you do. So what is practicing? And do you want to take this? I'll pass the
Sure.
on.
So one of the things that gets us in a rut in practicing is thinking that we always have to go left to right, and we always have to play everything on the page, and if we don't, we have failed. So we really want to encourage you to play within your practice. You do not have to play all of the notes on the page, and you do not have to play them in the order they're written. So you just use what works to learn. I had a friend tell me that when you're working on music, this is as much as your brain can really capture at a time. So if your chunk is bigger than that, you probably want to rethink it. You can also keep track of what doesn't work. Science is much better at making it a valuable finding to know what doesn't work. We tend to think if it didn't work, I failed, but you found out something didn't work, and that's more knowledge. So that is still progress to find out what doesn't work. As you master skills, you're looking for ease and speed, and you're also looking to be able to produce it in tense circumstances. So make sure you're not just getting better in the practice room, but when you're starting to feel confident, turn the record button on. See if it still sticks when you've got extra pressure. Ask someone else to listen to you, maybe your band director, maybe a friend. And remember that success is built on multiple failures. I also had a teacher who said, perfect practice makes better. Don't let that stress you out, because however little time you have to practice, however little brain power you have, you can still get something done. Just remember to think of those small chunks, and that learning what doesn't work is progress. So practice takes patience, it takes repetition, just like video games. We need a little carrot on the stick to help us get in there sometimes. So maybe you have to reward yourself with a bubble tea or something, or just checking something off on a list. But it is great if you start to enjoy practice, and then you can play the clarinet like you play games. Uh, or like yoga. Both Dr. Kirk Doyle and I like yoga a lot. And then it also helps to keep your references in mind. Listen a lot to the people you want to sound like. Try to think about every sound as an important sound. Don't warm up and just throw it away. And listen to your favorite music for inspiration.
I want to ask, who is your Katie Ledecky of the clarinet? Who is your, the person you want to sound like? And if you don't know, that's okay. What kind of music inspires you? Can you transcribe one of those pop tunes you like and play it on your clarinet? How do these people practice? How do these athletes practice? Or how do these bands make themselves better and record? So think about how you can take that into the practice room.
So building on that, those top level athletes, and there are top level video game players too, they become that way because they understand how motivation and drive and confidence works. And they have a coach that's helping them with that. So one of the most useful things that someone told me about was an identity statement. And I'm telling you, this can feel really silly, but you have to commit to saying it in the morning and at night in a mirror, looking at yourself, possibly like Grey's Anatomy or other shows. I'm not sure if people are still familiar with that. But the idea is to pick two adjectives that describe you right now, that you would have no problem telling someone you just met, hey, I'm a musician. And then, well, that's a noun. That's a noun. So pick one noun and two adjectives. So, for instance, my identity statement all through my graduate degrees was I am a determined, sensitive musician. I might not have felt the most confident I ever have, but I knew that I could convince myself and other people that I was those things. What I wanted to be was the next phrase. So I put, I am a confident professional musician. And look, it worked. So we have a little word cloud. I believe in the next slide. Yeah, you can click on the remote. And when we send these slides out at the end, I will include that word cloud so you can look at other people's adjectives and see if they inspire you. If you're not good at Mad Libs, you can steal someone else's word. That's no problem.
So thinking about practice, you learned in the last session about your fundamentals. Most likely you talked about posture, air and proper breathing, embouchure and tongue position, your hand and finger control, articulation, finger technique, and tuning. So when we practice, it's our clarinet workout. So how are you using those fundamentals in your workout? Something we encourage you to do is keep a daily practice log so that you know what you did each day, even just setting goals. So maybe you have a goal of, I'm going to make my articulation better today. How will I achieve that goal? And you decide how you're going to do that. How long did you practice? And then what went well and what do you want to improve tomorrow? There are a whole bunch of different practice planners out there you can buy, or you can just get a notebook and make your own style. So thinking about what works for you and how you can plan.
Oh,
So
can we go back
building,
one
yeah,
slide?
go back. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry. So just to explain, the one that looks like chicken scratch is mine. And that's a very low budget practice log. And so what I value when I do that is I can put the tempo I played at, and then I put one slash if I practice it. I put another slash if I recorded it. So I have an X, and I circle it if I listen back to it, because I found I progressed much more quickly when I recorded myself in every practice session and when I listened to it when I could still do something about it.
So jumping into building that clarinet workout or our warm up. You want to maybe start with some breathing exercises and thinking about stretching. We really want to think about how our body feels every time we come to the instrument. When we maybe run, if you're a runner or doing any kind of athletics, you probably start by walking slowly. You don't just dive into your event. So that's sort of our long tones, just getting everything moving. We want to be thinking about the air, your embouchure, your fingers, and perhaps your tuning. Working then at a medium pace, maybe start into some slow scales and technical exercises. And then when we get ready to run, we're going to speed up those scales and technical exercises. You could combine playing with slurred scales or legato or staccato articulation, depending on what you want to work on. And then think about if you have arm day or leg day, or, alternate some of your activities and things that you want to practice. But we have some articulation drills, maybe some altissimo training, or again, keeping working on those abs, because breathing is everything with the instrument. If we don't blow air through the instrument, it does not make a sound. So always thinking about your breathing.
I love that, because how many times have we all walked into the practice room and tried that crazy lick and been like, oh, I can't do it. Well, you didn't warm up. And if you did that at the gym, you'd get hurt. So you have to remember that we are athletes of the small muscles, and they do need warming up and care. Also, one of those things that I like to bring in is the breath or the fundamentals. You can always think about them, not just in your warm up, but all throughout. It's never too late to go back and fix a fundamental. And so I mentioned earlier that I don't progress as quickly if I don't listen to myself regularly. So it's important to remember that what the role of the coach is to evaluate and assess and create a plan. And so as you become your own teacher, you have to do that for yourself. And I like to ask my students, they are college students, but I say, if you didn't listen back, did you really practice? Because there was no self-evaluation. And if you didn't video record, how can you teach yourself if you can't see yourself? Would you have a lesson with a teacher where they can't see you? And would you have high expectations for that? Not that you can't ever do that. Sometimes it's better than nothing, but you have the tools to give yourself everything you need. So why not? All right. I think this one is me. So my funny last name is half French, and I really thought I was clever saying the art of French air, which is kind of like French cuisine. But there are two people that I really like who really nailed the idea of clarinet air, and that is Jean-Marc Volta, who wrote the bass clarinet, and Paul Jean, and he wrote Vademecum, among many other things. And I think they really nailed it for breath. So I'm going to take you through just a couple breathing exercises to start out, so we're ready, so we can nail this and have all our ducks in a line. So one of the very first things we want to learn with breath is that there are multiple levels to the breath. So I always tell people, think that you're just going to mouth breathe, like someone in Stranger Things. You're going to go, and you can even put your hand on your throat and feel it there, just like, and then you put your hand a little lower and you go, and you can see your shoulders moving. And then you put your hand on your belly. And it'll start to slow down. And you can feel it moving there. And then you're going to put your hand on your back and you get into your Vader breath. I think of it like the pa. Now, what we forget a lot of times is that we don't take a good in breath if we haven't completely cleared our system. So one of my favorite warm-up breaths, if I know I've been running around doing a bunch of things and I'm not quite in the mental space, I will do 7 outs for 1 in. So you can try it with me. I'll walk you through it a bit. You take a big breath in and you're going to breathe out 7 times without breathing in. So they're going to get really small at the end. Don't worry, persevere. It will be fine. But go ahead and measure your first breath. It doesn't have to be the biggest out of your life, but we'll try it a couple times. So first time, take a breath in. You can go out. You can put your hand there to feel it. Out. Third time, fourth time, fifth, sixth, so small, seventh, and then breathe in. And you're going to breathe out again. Out. Second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, sixth time, tiny little seventh, and breathe in. Then you're going to put your hand right on the small of your back and you go against a wall. You can do this in a wall sit. You can do this against your chair. And as you breathe in, you're going to try and expand that space out. You're going to go. And we're going to start doing what I call a 2-to-1 breath. So you're going to breathe in for 4 counts, and then you're going to try and breathe out for 8. But the real trick to this in my book is that we can't get tight. As soon as we're done exhaling, we have to inhale back. So we're going to go ahead and try it. I'll count fairly quickly. We're going to exhale for 4 breaths. Sorry, I got that backwards. We're going to inhale for 4 seconds and we're going to exhale for 8. Okay, here we go. 7, 8. 3, 4, and out. And in. 2, 3, 4, and out. Go ahead and lift your legs off the floor so they're straight out. Try it again. In. And out. So this is something you can do anytime you think about it. I love to do it when I'm walking somewhere. When I'm running, I'm always trying to breathe out twice as long as I inhale. And as I get more tired, it becomes a smaller count and it becomes closer and closer. Like I'll start 4 in, 8 out, and then it'll be maybe 6 in, 6 out, and then 4 in, 4 out. And then as I'm getting really winded, 2 in, 2 out, and then 1 in, 1 out. I know I'm not gonna make it much farther. It's almost the end. So always keep an eye on your breath. One of my teachers explained to me that our diaphragm always wants to lift to push the breath out. And what we have to do is use the muscles around it, which is your core, which is why we lifted those legs in the air, to keep that diaphragm grounding down, because that will pressurize the space, kind of like a Cheese Whiz can or a graffiti spray paint can. Instead of what happens when the diaphragm naturally pushes it out, it's like a balloon. It goes, and that's not the kind of air we want to play the clarinet. The Cheese Whiz can, the spray paint, the advantage is that when you get to the end of it, it's still pressurized and it's still maintaining tone consistency. So you make it all the way to the end instead of squeezing more and more. Okay, so let's take a look at these 2 exercises. You're going to go ahead and set up your embouchure. So for me, I like to think of a whistle. And then I find those 2 corners of my whistle, not the corners of my lips, but the corners of my whistle. And I suck in. Put my finger here and I blow out. And then I'll start adding articulation. And my whole goal is to keep my lips still while I'm doing this. Then you'll look at the exercise over on the left side of the screen, right side if you're looking at it face on. And what you do is you take that air and you crescendo the air until you can sing a note. You can do this off the clarinet. You can do it on the clarinet. If you're off the clarinet, I like to think of Lee because it keeps my tongue very light. And it really helps me think of how to vibrate it in. Both of these start on a low E. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. It's so French. So I'm going to start until I get a note. And then if you see in the next one, I'm going to take that note and decrescendo it. It's very satisfying. It's like clarinet ASMR. It's joyful air noises. So you can try all of those. They get harder. Down at the bottom, you have one that's soft with soft air, soft sound. And the very hardest one, the 12th one, we've got piano air, loud sound, and we've got forte air, soft sound. And there you'll really notice how much you want to use your lips to make the sound speak and how much more efficient it is to let the air do that job. Okay, so I like to say active long tones. I think Vade Mecum, the special trills, is about as active of a long tone as you can get. And the reason why it's super effective is because he puts those accents right where you want to level off on your support. So instead of dying down doing the balloon thing, you have to push the air by engaging and grounding down your abdomen. Maybe you've heard your band director say push your air. Sometimes we think, and we push and we get really tight in our throat, and that's not what it is. What it is more of a levitating out of your chair, rocking up on your heels, which I will do sometimes while practicing if I want to engage that support. Or my students have even seen me, I'll make them play a wide interval, stepping up onto a piano bench. But please be safe and don't do this in the wrong shoes. So when we play vademecum, I also say I like register exercises, and I say never do just what's on the page. So a lot of times I'll take my vademecum up the 12th, and from the 12th I'll go up an octave. So for instance, and I can go up the 12th. And I can go up an octave beyond that. Uh-huh. I think I'm getting some feedback on that. But that way, you're making sure that you're open here and you're not getting super low with the tongue in the low notes. You're not getting super tight with the jaw in the high notes. You're giving yourself a wide range to play those exercises in. So I hope that helps. That is the art of French air. Ah, this is also French. So if you're struggling a lot with an interval, I believe strongly that you need to be able to say or sing what you want to play. I also believe that behind every good articulation, there is a strong air shape. And so I call that the he. And I often think of my undergrad professor who would talk like, what? What are you doing? Who are you going there with? Why? That was Michael Galvan, if anyone is wondering. But so it's this active H on the end. And when you connect, it means that the fast air is right at the end of it. So I always told the story. I like to, when I learned how to ride a bike, I went down the driveway and I got really nervous. So I slowed down. I had to turn and I was really worried about it. So I slowed down until the bike fell over. So if we don't have momentum with our air, if we don't have momentum, we can't steer. And it's really important to remember that, because the intervals that scare us is where we usually turn the water faucet of air down to a trickle. So li, di are good for tongued articulations, and you can practice them like he, li. So I'm feeling the air on my hand. I'm trying to make sure it's the same speed even when I add the tongue. And it's very subtle, but it's very helpful. So if I were to play one of these notes with those, I could do and try to make so that you can't hear the difference between the first one, which was a he, and the second one that was a li. And then same thing, I could take those up the 12th, and then I could do an octave above that. That's something that follows all along. But now, the singing of intervals. He puts vowels there that are very helpful. If you really hate a certain interval, let's see if I can do it. It's up there. But that helps you access the different parts of resonance in your head and to think more what I call the cathedral space. Sometimes for notes, I'll think of a unicorn horn or a whale blowhole or straight out and back if it's super high. But yes, so vocalizing and using air syllables. Even if you hate to sing, you can do it in a sort of scatty way that doesn't involve pitch, and it will still improve the air on the ends, middles, and fronts of the notes, which is the whole note.
So something I like to talk about with my students, we're all, thinking about those high notes in the altissimo register. And so if we blow too hard up there, what happens? We squeak. And so we need to think about what kind of air we need up there. And so something I do, and I actually have my bubbles right here. I've been doing this with my college students. What kind of air do you need to make one big bubble sustain versus a lot of air where the bubbles go everywhere, right? So that's a whole different part of the clarinet. So if we're thinking about how we blow our bubbles, let's see if mine will work. Oh, that was a big one. They're not working today. I'll try one more time. I'm sustaining that air and really concentrating it so that I can get those high notes to come out in the way I want them to, but I'm not overblowing and popping the higher partial. So don't be afraid of your high notes. Think about what kind of air you need for them and only play to the open hole. So for example, we're up here on maybe a high D. This is the hole that's open. So the clarinet's really kind of only this long. So we don't need to blow for the low E necessarily. We need to be thinking sensitively and centering that airstream. So think about how blowing bubbles and that kind of concentrated centered air can help control and make that high register a little bit easier for you. And for those in middle school, even just getting up to the high C, I know is very difficult. So we have to have that right balance of enough mouthpiece in your mouth and things. And then we're trying to work on technique and all this other stuff. So think about your air constantly. Moving on ahead into some long tones, and I'll just kind of touch on these because it's a lot of the same kinds of things that we were just talking about. But thinking about the length of the instrument that you're playing through, and then just trying different long tones every day. If there's some that you like, the Digital Clarinet Academy has all sorts of free stuff you can download, all sorts of fun little things. The Christmas tree exercise is one my students always really, really love. But then just working your way up the instrument in some of these. Thinking about listening to your tone, your embouchure being stable, flexible, but stable. So you're not biting to play higher and not biting to play softer. And then just listening to your pitch using maybe we call them drones. Some people call it the tuning CD, but I always recommend the app Tonal Energy. You can download it on your phone and it does all sorts of cool stuff. You can have a metronome, you can have the tuner, you can have it all going at once, you can record yourself. So use that app to do all the things, and obviously turn your notifications off so you're not distracted while you practice. But it really does help do all of the things we would like to do on the clarinet. Some that I enjoy doing are the chromatic long tones. I got these from David Weber, and a lot of my teachers, John Manassi uses these. The chromatic long tones really help you just kind of generally work your way up the instrument every day versus diving right into the high notes and such. The bel cantos are also a really nice one. And so just thinking about how we can really grow and sustain the tone in the same ways we were talking about with the Volta and the Jean Jean. So
Those are also great ones to sing, the bel canto ones.
yes, absolutely. Once we get kind of the lower range and everything warmed up, start moving across the instrument with some different arpeggiated warm-ups and scales, perhaps. Notice that the arpeggio snake at the bottom, you can start it with the eighth note at 60, and then maybe move it up to 120, and eventually have the goal of getting to a quarter note equals 120. So you're just working on getting your fingers to move a little bit faster, but in your warm up, it's not something you're working on for school or for a solo festival. It's just laying the groundwork for your technique. For those you practice scales, you practice arpeggios, that is your vocabulary. And we draw on that then when we play our solo music or our band music. We're going to be looking for those key areas and those vocabulary words as we perform. Oh, we lost your audio.
I muted myself. So sometimes when we are practicing, we get confused because we don't have enough endurance right away. And we're like, I got this schedule from my teacher. I'm supposed to play 5 minutes of long tones and 10 minutes of this and 10 minutes of that. But by the time I get to my repertoire, I'm too tired. So just like an athlete, it's not good to practice when you are too tired. You will learn bad habits and you might hurt yourself. Much less likely on the clarinet, but you won't be doing perfect practice makes better. You'll be doing tired practice makes tireder. So I thought of some exercises for my students that you can do anytime you think of them off the clarinet, and I think they're really fun. So I was just talking with a student about how when you're learning to circular breathe, or even when you're learning to not puff out your cheeks, a really helpful thing can be filling your mouth with water and doing a fountain, slowly squirting it out, doing it with your fingers and then with that. But that is not an exercise you can do everywhere. You should only do that around a sink. So that made me think of the opposite action, which is the fish face. And I have a challenge for you all. I want to see your fish face, and then I want to see if you can take your top lip and move it. So what am I talking about? This is what I'm talking about.
Oh my goodness.
It's the rabbit add-on to the fish face.
Hard.
So the reason that we do that is a lot of times your embouchure is getting tired and your reeds are dying because your top lip is coming out and down on the mouthpiece, which means all that pressure is making the lower lip push up, which is shortening the life of your reed and your practice session. So by freeing the upper lip, I treat it kind of like a curtain. And it allows me to build some strength there because actually stability is strength, like doing a plank. You have to think that being able to hold a position is a much better sign of strength than leaning against something. So the other thing you can do is use any type of straw. And even if you don't have a straw, you can use your finger. Make sure it's clean. Make sure it's not flu season or something. But you're going to preset your embouchure. Again, I thought of that whistle, sucking in. And then you put your finger right behind your top teeth, right where the reed would go. You practice breathing in and out, and then you're going to add articulation. So each time you do it, make sure you preset your embouchure. And so I'm doing inhale articulations and exhale because when you inhale, it's much easier to focus on the coming away. When we exhale, we tend to scoop and move farther forward. We let the air push it out. So I'm thinking, I'm trying to make it the same motion, both inhaling and exhaling. This is also really helpful because most students, you'll see them with a perfect embouchure when they inhale and then kablooey. It all disappears on the exhale. So the best answer is to practice this off the clarinet to build the muscles up instead of letting them collapse onto the mouthpiece. So a mirror is great, but you can always open up your camera app on your phone and just do it there. Another thing I really like to do, and it's very helpful for ensemble rehearsals are never boring, but classes are never, nothing's ever boring. But just in case you go somewhere that is boring and you need to yawn and you don't want them to know, a closed lip yawn is a really great way to work on your space and your lip stability. And it's a good trick to have for a very important meeting or job interview. One more thing to keep in mind is your cheekbones. So a lot of times when we play high notes, what goes up? The eyebrows. This is not helpful. This creates lots of tension here. And I will always remember when I finished one of my degrees, I had bangs and I cut them off. And then I saw what my forehead was doing while I was articulating. And I was like, oh no, I want my bangs back. But it is important to make sure that your forehead is not carrying all that tension, because if there's tension in your forehead, there's going to be tension in your jaw. The jaw hides tension whenever there's tension anywhere else. And if there's tension in your jaw, there's probably tension in your hands. So a lot of times I tell my students their technique problems go back to their jaw. Because we have to find a way to blow efficiently and easily. So the cheekbones are very important. What you do, you're like, I can't move my cheekbones. But if you smile, everybody, big smile, your cheekbones probably move. So put your finger there, and then you're going to tell yourself you're going to smile, but you're going to stop right before your lips move and see if you can move them up. And this is a really fun trick if you have a friend in that class or ensemble that is not boring. You can make eye contact and just wiggle your cheekbones at them, and it will be hilarious. I think so. So yes, I put down here in more of my chicken scratch that way of finding the embouchure, the whistle. And if you want to work on your corners, there's something called the window. But if you're on a budget, you can do that just by whistling in and out, trying to keep it stable. And then you can do the that's an exercise I'll do a lot. My kids actually yell at me when I do it in the car. They don't like it. But you whistle and you practice moving your corners out so far you can't whistle anymore and coming back. And that's essentially what the window is doing. And that is a tool that people sell to work on the embouchure. All of these things, don't do them to the point of pain. If you've been doing it for 40 minutes, that's probably too much. But it's a very easy thing that you can think of it during the day and you do it, and that will help your embouchure last longer in your practice session. Yes. There is one other thing when you add the horn. So I will do a lot of practice with the mouthpiece and barrel because that's less effort than putting the whole clarinet together. So I'm listening to the pitch while I'm blowing out and inhaling, trying to make it the same pitch because that's the same speed of air, and to keep it the same pitch when I'm articulating on the inhale and the exhale. When I'm convinced that's the same, then I can add the actual playing. And you can alternate between those as much as you want. Now, the clarinet carries a lot more resistance than the mouthpiece and barrel. So a lot of your embouchure problems are coming from reacting to that resistance. So one thing I do, I don't know if Google will like this, but I'm going to blow the air and I remove it to play the sound. You'll find that you might be tightening in your throat or changing in your throat to anticipate that. So you can try. And then the other one that we don't notice, a lot of times our embouchure changes with pitch because our brain is very intelligent and it tells us high notes are hard, low notes are easy. So instead you take your finger and if your lips are grabbing, I'm going to show you a squeak. Everyone ready for a squeak? If your lips are grabbing, when you block it, it's a very cute squeak. Isn't that a cute squeak? There are many not cute squeaks, but that one is pretty cute. But yeah, it's just a good way to test. Because if your embouchure is not working, your engine's not working. Yes, I also like to say there are some rules for rhythm. Always think about rhythm. This sounds like Fight Club or something. Use the metronome as a tool, not a crutch. And this means don't leave it on if you're not using it. Please don't train yourself to ignore your metronome. When I say always think about rhythm, that has to do with these quarter-sized chunks. Build yourself an exercise with equivalent rests. So if you're playing like ba da 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 dee da da da, off, 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 ba da 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 dee da da da, off, 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 you're going to be helping yourself with your rhythm by having a planned rest instead of ba da 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 dee da 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 da, ba da 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 dee da 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 da. It's very hard to keep it even if you're doing that. Also use patterns that keep you accountable. For my studio, we use these from Michael Wayne. And so you set your metronome on triplets if you have groupings of 4 and you play long, long, short, short, long, long, short, short. So then you have a click for every note except the second short. Short, short, long, long, short, short, long, long. There's only one note that gets to be free. Because the more notes you have that are not bound by a click, the more you risk to compress. But this is a tool and not a crutch because you need to also play with macro beats so that you're testing, not always a quarter note beat, but a half note beat maybe. So you see if you're not arriving at the right time because your 16ths don't equal each other, or even a whole note beat. That keeps you accountable. And it also makes your brain think a lot, like upbeats, but I only torture college students with upbeats. But if your brain is having to think, you are using the metronome correctly. If your brain is not thinking, you are not using the metronome like a tool. It is a crutch.
And I'll jump in on that just a little bit with metronomes. A lot of us like to tap our feet. Be sure you're tapping your foot in time. And something you might play with is instead of tapping your toes, what if you tapped your heel? You know, sometimes we talk about tapping our toe in our shoe. When I tap my heel, I actually stay more in time and it's more central to my body, especially like if you're going to play a solo somewhere and you're standing to play. It helps not unbalance your body. So play around with tapping different parts of your foot and see if one of them is a little bit better and a little more consistently with the metronome. So being sure you're internalizing that. So practicing our scales. trying different rhythms with our scales, kind of jumping on the triplet bandwagon here. You can use different kinds of triplets. And this comes from, I believe it's Lebonki exercises. And then down at the bottom, just general C major written out there. And you've got some arpeggios and broken chords. So again, working on that vocabulary with your technique, but thinking rhythmically through all of that. You want to jump on that? Oh, you're muted. Andrea, you're muted.
I have small kids in the household, and I'm like, I don't want them to yell, but I promise I'll remember next time. So when you play scales that start on an upbeat, it reorganizes your brain. And that is important. Someone told me it's the secret to long life. So always put the towel in a different spot. Start on an upbeat when you can. Make your brain think.
Yeah, something a teacher told me is be sure you put the emphasis on the right syllable. No, syllable. So thinking about when you start on an upbeat, yenda to yenda, that we really show our listener where that actual beat is when we start on an upbeat. So whether it be 2/16, 2/8 notes, 1/8 note, really showing when you actually arrive at that next downbeat. And if you feel that, you're going to play with better rhythm and better time. So let's see, what do we have next? Some more finger technique, just more examples of things you can do. Just looking ahead to articulation. Do you want to jump on that one?
Sure.
Right.
So when we're building articulation, I talked a lot about how to make sure you're thinking of the away to shape the to. And a lot of times for students, we've talked about cue words, but what we really need is a cue action. So for some of them, they think of inhaling with a straw. Some of them, they think like a cat hiss. Some of them, they think, maybe they do think of a word, or they think of an action, like I call this the lollipop one. But having an action that will reassure you it's going to happen helps you build a habit. And then you can test stability with resistance and pitch changes, and also with dynamics. So there's another really cool Volta exercise on the side here. And what he does is he makes you think about the front, middle, and end of the note in the way that you play them. So for instance, you start with a normal volume, and then you're going to play softs getting louder. And then you're going to play forte pianos. And then you're going to play piano fortes. And that's where I like to tell people that when you're practicing accents, you really need to practice them backwards. And so you can do that even with your air. He, he. Those are those syllables that I was talking about again. So being able to create an accent without gripping more and using the tongue, without being dependent on those elements, you become more air efficient. And we talked a little bit about release articulation, but a very easy way to do that is to set up your embouchure and everything, start the air, and then use the tongue to stop the air. Again, we're aiming for the tip of the tongue on the tip of the reed, and then release to articulate. So for instance, I'm starting the air first, stopping, so I know where my tongue's hitting on the reed, and then I have that symmetrical motion. So that just helps me be accountable. And then you have to build endurance and range. And I love the exercise that Dr. Kirk Doyle added down here. And it's a good way to practice slurring up and articulating down. So you think like a palindrome, you go up. So I have that H on the end for my active air to carry me down.
Something else I love to do with this exercise, we need to start working on speed. How many of us, when we play something repeated articulation, we get stuck? Our tongue gets really heavy and hard on the reed. So we need to keep remembering that tip to tip articulation. I tell my students to think about maybe even like 2 taste buds at the front of the tongue are touching the reed. And it's more like you're licking the reed. Everybody seen the movie Christmas Story? You don't want to get your tongue stuck to the flagpole. Just really, really barely touch that reed at the tip. And something we talk about, I do a lot of different variants on this exercise, but we can take it and do it more legato first. So what I like to do is play 4 beats of legato tongue, and then I'm going to slur up and down the scale. Then I'm going to imagine a repeat sign around that scale, and I'm going to then legato tongue it, and then I'm going to staccato tongue it if I'm working on staccato. So just as an example. And you're putting your metronome on while you're doing this and kind of assessing how fast can I go before I get tight, and understanding how we work on that flexibility and velocity. And then you can do all sorts of combinations, slur to, tongue to, and all sorts of different things with your articulation, but just working for ease and velocity in those. Let's see, we're getting low on time. Let's see what we got here. Go ahead.
Okay. So yes, these are other resources that you can add in. And the one with all the words I'm describing about that angle that we set up so many times. But there's one thing here that's a little different. So it's finding your cheekbones with your heels, making your clarinet embouchure, and then letting your heels slide down, kind of like the scream. Ah! But this really helps us. Like I loved with Dr. Doyle's exercise there. She used the same air for every type of articulation, slurred, super short, short. She did not change her embouchure. She did not change her air. And so we're looking for a space here, cheekbone to chin, that's not going to change as we're going up to the altissimo. So I'll put the bell in my knees, and I'll think. And I'll work my way up to make sure that I'm staying open instead of getting tighter. And the other one just has some slurring patterns that work really well. Norman Heim has a great book for the altissimo that I highly encourage everyone to explore.
And another one I don't think I mentioned in here, Alessandro Carbonari's Art of Tone and Technique has an excellent section on altissimo and some long tones. Again, the chromatics, you start with the chromatics, but working your way up into the altissimo and getting comfortable. So
yes. So these are other ones that help with the opening, and they involve singing. And then you add articulations on top. The numbers you see there are actually dynamic. So you think about getting louder and softer. The first time you can range from a 3 to a 6, the second time from a 7 to a 10, really loud, back to a 3 to 6, and then a 4 to a 1. So practicing your soft at the end instead of starting tight.
and I love using that, like the reverse long tone, if anybody's done that, where you start with a really full tone and you come back, so that then you start your soft long tone and you know where you are. So I love that. Absolutely. So just some examples of some warm-ups. You want to jump into yours?
Oh, yeah. So we just included these so you can pick from them whatever you want. This is one that I built for my high school and university students. It uses some vademecum. It's got a really nice articulation exercise and something from Heim. But basically, you want to build your own menu. Think about what you want to focus on and think about what makes it better. So on the next slide, you'll see even more.
I have some of my warm-ups here, taken from a lot of different sources. I like to start with those chromatic long tones, move into arpeggios. I do some crutch exercises, and then the Perron, it's kind of like if you've ever studied piano, and the Hanon exercises. And then that last one is that Carbonari that I mentioned, the Art of Tone and Technique. And my goal is, if I have a certain high note in a piece, I need to be able to play a third above that comfortably, so that then when you're playing that actual, let's say it's a high E, I need to be able to play at least a G, if not even higher than that, and so on and so forth up. So I had a piece a few years ago, I was on a high B, I think, and I was like, okay, I got to be at least cozy on a high C and see if I can push myself even higher than that. So,
And that's even true on E flat clarinet.
yes, much, yes, absolutely.
And this is another warm up. I try to give some timings for my students to give them an idea. Like if this is just a 20-minute warm up, so it's split up into 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Those are some of the things I think are really helpful.
So just some things to remember. We talked about a lot of stuff. Do remember, and this is a quote from one of my teachers, practicing is a gift. And it's a time of exploration and experimentation, and it's okay to fail, and you'll learn from your failures as much as you will your successes. We get to play music like you play games or like a child plays with toys. Remember how much fun that was, and you're not judging when you're playing with a toy, you're just having fun. And so see if you can always come back to that with your clarinet practice. Thinking about your statements, I'm going to do something well today, I'm going to get better at one of these things today. Do notice what works and what doesn't, and your practice process will help you progress. And then just always making beautiful sounds and sing through your music. And if there's anything you want to add on to those.
Yeah, and if you want to run with this video game idea, give yourself points. Give
Yes.
yourself points for showing up, points for doing the exercises you targeted in your warm up. Um, some people really like the penny method where you line 10 up and you have to play it 10 times in a row. I think it takes less time to just record myself and see if I can if I can perform it for myself and listen back. But everyone can earn their own points how they want. Um, and then remembering that you learn when you also can't do something. That's also a discovery. And just being a scientist about it, being like, well, okay, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? It squeaked. Okay, can I do that squeak on purpose? And then you'll be better prepared and less judgmental of yourself. So practicing that teacher persona as well. How would I talk to my students? Or if I don't have any students, if I had students, how would I talk to them? How would I help my younger brother with something? How would I help my friend with something? Depending on the friendship. Um, always use a positive voice in your practice.
Thank you all for being here.
Happy
Thank you both so
practicing.
much.